Good morning, podcast listeners. This is the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. This is Raising 10, episode 23. Special guests today. They're all special. Bryan Hardy, he's going to tell you a little bit about what he does, but all this is very relevant to raising kids. And if you don't have kids, it's still relevant if you're in that business world. And remember, you can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. If you want to be a guest or you have a guest that would work on this podcast, which they just about all do, hit me up on my social media platforms. So, Bryan, welcome to my podcast. I appreciate you being on. We had a little conversation like I always do with my guests last week, and you definitely fit into this whole scheme of things. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do, and then we'll just kind of wing it.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. It's a pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think we could have chatted for hours.
Yep.
No doubt about that. And yeah, what I do essentially is make nutrition and healthy living, specifically for men, more digestible and delicious and sustainable. That's
Okay.
if I had to boil it down to one sentence, that would be sort of it. How that happens takes different forms. I've got an extensive background in nutrition and all things to do with wellness and mindset and body work and the mental emotional piece and fitness and athletic training, all kinds of things. I've always been into the body and wanted to move, in a way that felt empowering and fun. I grew up watching action movies and I wanted to do what they were doing. Right. So here's these larger than life characters that are jumping over buildings and, flying through the air and doing all kind of stuff. And so me and my friends would try to recreate that, right, as kids. And then that slowly led to, okay, I guess I better get into the weight room because I can't do a single chin up. Here I am at 12 years old. I can't do a single chin up. So that's pretty embarrassing. So I better start lifting weights, and that progressed. And then the nutrition interest started to grow. And then I got very ill at 18. I almost died. And that really woke me up. And
And that's
yeah,
what I wanted
it's been
people
a
to
wild
hear.
journey.
I remember you telling me that, and I thought that was important to get that helped you get to where you're at. So that failure, if you want to call it that, actually ended up helping you with your success.
Yeah, it's one of those things. And the longer I'm in this field, and not even just the health field, it's just the business field, the life, the field of life, and people that are really going for it. Most everyone has something where they were utterly humbled and just broken down to the studs and had to rebuild. And that, for me, I count myself really blessed now that happened at 18, because I see it with many of the individuals I speak to and that I coach, that it doesn't hit them until their 40s or beyond.
Right.
And at that point, I mean, it's a lot harder to bounce back. You don't have the benefit of youth on your side that I had. And so, yeah, it sucked having your appendix rupture and then get misdiagnosed and then have surgery to save your life and then have weeks and months of recovery was what I went through. And it was not fun. And I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I'm so glad it happened. And I'm so glad that I, was given a second chance, because it sharpened my focus and it really helped me eliminate what wasn't for me when it came
Right.
to a path forward. And yeah, that was in early 2010 that happened. So here we are 16 years later.
Yeah.
And about 15 of those years, I've been obsessed with health, because I needed to be in order to feel like myself again.
So a funny thing, and we talked about this last week, is you're in the same age group as my children. And when I grew up as a baby boomer, we had nothing to do except play, right? Exercise, play sports. It was much less expensive for us to play sports. It wasn't as, you go to a park around my neighborhood on the weekends and every soccer park is packed with cars and things like that. It wasn't like that, but we were still, involved in Little League and Pop Warner and all those things. And then my kids still didn't have social media, but it was coming on, right? And since I have 7 daughters and a son, all my daughters played sports and my son too. So we were always running around doing something. And I think this newer generation with the social media, doesn't have the benefits of the physical piece of it. The other thing I told you, when I was a kid, there were not fast food restaurants available like they are now. Every other building has a restaurant you can get MSG and all this other crap in, right? And if we ate fast food, it was because my mom was treating us to something. It wasn't a replacement for dinner ever, right? Maybe she was tired on a Friday or whatever. Do you find that? So anyway, so tell me a little bit about your clientele. So you said before we started here that a lot of your clientele have children, they're in families, and kind of tell me what they're kind of searching for on average.
Yeah, they're usually 40 plus, a kid or two, or preparing for kids.
Mhm.
And oftentimes they have, high, sort of executive corporate gigs, or they have their own business that they're operating, or a bit of a combination of the two. And many times they're hitting a wall, right? They're hitting a wall, what we would refer to as burnout,
Physically and mentally.
physically and mentally.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, usually together. And we can talk about why that's the case, because the body is the mind and the mind is the body. There's no separation between the two,
Right.
and they both impact each other, right, in a really real, tangible way. And I can share an experience or a conversation I had just last night about how that shows up in sort of the down to earth, way to apply that. But they're often running into a wall. They feel just heavy. They feel bloated after their meals. They feel foggy. They're waking up. They're not fresh when they wake up in the morning, right? They're not just like jumping out of bed, zest for life, ready to crush the day, ready to work out. They really have to work themselves into the day. And it takes usually some caffeine and a bunch of time and maybe some scrolling on the phone. And they're trying to do something to like get momentum. And they don't really get there. They might get there some days, other days they're just, surviving.
They're looking for that
But
dopamine.
yeah, exactly. They're looking for something, right? It's relief many times is what it is. They're looking for relief. And they're looking for what I would say they're really looking for is inspiration, right? Something that moves them, that motivates them to want to show up and do their best. But we live in a world where you have to be very, very, very hyper aware and protective of what are you bringing in, not just through your mouth, right, through the food you consume, which of course is massively important, but the information, right, that you expose yourself to, the devices you expose yourself to, and in what form and when are you doing that, has a big impact, right? Because I can guarantee anybody who either wakes up scrolling and like in the kind of way they're not learning things, they're not seeing things that make them laugh, they're not having a good time. It's like outrage and stress and division and, just highly polarized takes on, either side of the argument, depending on their, leaning of various things. And that's not just political. That's like religious and health and everything, dietary, the whole thing. But so eventually they're running into that wall and they know that something has to change. They know that what they're doing isn't working. They know that they're not taking care of their body the way that they ought to. Many times they were athletes in their younger years, and so they have some connection to the body and training and nutrition, but they don't have the ability to kind of zoom out and bring these different pieces into their life in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And what makes sense for a 45-year-old father of two that are young and who he's, not getting the best sleep, he's like, he's got a lot of demands on his time. It wouldn't make sense for him to try to train like a professional athlete or like his favorite Instagram influencer who's doing like high intensity training 6 days a week. Like that would not make sense for that individual. And if he attempted to do that, which many do, especially the achievement oriented, men among us who really want to push and push and push, they attempt to do that. And then they wonder, why am I always tired? Why am I always sore? I can't seem to lose the fat that I want to lose. I can't seem to build muscle the way I used to. What's going on? And it's like, well, clearly your system's already stressed, and then you're throwing more stress on top of your system, and you can't recover to actually get the benefit of what you think you're supposed to do from an exercise perspective.
So it's funny.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You can finish that.
No, just it's so much becomes about the context for that individual. Right? There's no one size fits all. There's principles that are universal, And there's certain practices that 9 times out of 10 are going to move you in the right direction. They're going to put more gas in the tank, but nothing is, set in stone, right? And depending on the season of life, the season, if you live where I live, we get very extreme, fluctuation between the 4 seasons. Season of life, where you're at, where your family is at, right? Where your career is at, what are your goals, what's most important to you, all those things need to be taken into account to create anything that's going to be sustainable and it's actually going to fit and not feel like just some overwhelming to-do list of all the health stuff that you now have to do, right? That you don't really enjoy and you're not going to keep doing, certainly not for much longer.
There's a couple thoughts on everything you just said. One is I think a lot of people, when I see people at the gym, because I'm a regular goer to the gym, I just got back a little bit ago, they don't really know what they're doing or what they want out of that exercise time, right? They've never really defined that. And we talk about in business key performance indicators, right? The KPIs. They always bring that up, always bring that up. I'm so sick of hearing it. Because what's the most important is DPIs, daily performance indicators. What are you doing on a daily basis? It's going to move you a little bit forward. And that motivation is an emotion. It's just what you feel at that minute or that second. Where discipline is what you really, and it's funny, if you took these parents or leaders in business, they would have specific things, goals that they have in their company, right? We want to do, we want to increase sales by 20% by this time, and how are we going to do that? But they won't look in the mirror and go, okay, now what am I going to do? We're not going to do Ozempic and lose, 40 pounds in a month. And what's reasonable expectations, when you're out there doing that. Now, I've been lifting for a long time, and I love when I'm sore. Like, it's, that good soreness you get where you're like, man, I'm glad I did that exercise today because I could tell it was working where I wanted it to work. And so you talked about, God damn, we can go in so many directions here, but you have there's a statement on the notes I'm looking at. It says, you're not broken, you're depleted. So I really like that because I think people take that personally if they're not feeling good. Like, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? But they've never done anything to add to reduce that depletion, right? Speak to
Yeah.
that a little bit. And this could have to do with testosterone. This could have to do with a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
what kind of food they're eating or whatever.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Most of us are not raised with an understanding of how nutrition works in the body, right? We expect the body to just perform, right? Eat whatever you eat, eat enough, make sure you get enough calories. Maybe you're mindful of protein, but like the body will just like do what it's here to do, right? Which when you're young, maybe, right? Maybe it will do that for a certain period of time, but you will run into a point of diminishing returns where you don't have the raw materials that your body needs to adapt to stress, to recover, to generate testosterone, hormones, to generate dopamine. All these things are built inside of the body based on nutritional raw material.
And let me interject one thing to that, just because of age difference, right?
Yeah.
The food we were eating when we were kids and teenagers and young adults is much different than the food you're eating now.
Yes.
Yeah. So just for your older guys that are in my age group, I'll be 64 next month.
Yeah.
It's not all your fault. The map changed, and eating the same stuff when you were 16 is not the same stuff now when your kids are 16 years old. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure that they know that it's changed.
It's important. It's important. And you can look at the content of minerals in soil, which is measured, and it's been steadily declining.
Yes.
Right. And unless you have organic farming or regenerative farming where they're really building back up the soil on a regular basis and they're putting more into it than they're taking out, right? Which the majority of, commercial agriculture is chemical dependent, and the soil is basically dead and it's reliant on the fertilizer to grow anything, right? And you grow all your corn and your wheat and your canola and your soy and all this nonsense, which might be okay for, animals to survive on, but it's certainly not fit for humans, and it's not ideal for animals either. And like my mom grew up on a farm, right? So like the kind of stuff she would have grown up eating, right? It wasn't certified organic, but if it was just tomatoes from the garden, you better believe there's a lot more in that tomato than there is on the grocery store shelf.
100%.
So that's a really important thing to note. And I mean, for that reason, I don't see a case. I've never come across a case where someone can get the optimal amount of nutrition that they need from food alone. I just haven't seen it. And it's because it's not in the soil, right? Most people.
Are you leaning to the fact that we need supplements as well?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so this was the whole idea of, you're not broken, you're depleted. So I've just last evening, I was talking to a client and he's got a kind of a classic burnout picture. He's very capable. He's, highly intelligent, highly articulate, very skilled, very sensitive individual, and often operating in corporate environments that aren't designed for those kinds of individuals, right? They're designed to kind of like put your head down, just like grind through, and don't think too much, don't feel too much, just like get it done, which doesn't work for that kind of person, right? And I would be more on that side of the spectrum as well. Highly creative, artistic, seeing the big picture, right? But not just here to just grind themselves into a pulp for the bottom line. And so he was at this place where utterly burnt out, not sleeping, not taking care of himself, not exercising hardly at all, like doing just the bare minimum to get through the day.
Right.
And feeling just such a heaviness with like getting to his actual work, right? When he's in sales. And so it's like prospecting, conversations, follow-ups, all this kind of thing. And we did some work on the mind and the emotions to see how at an identity level he was set up to be burning himself out because he's trying to be somebody that he's not, right? And so that's never going to work, right? If you're trying to force yourself into a box that you're not a fit for, at some point or another, you will run into a wall and have to reckon with that. And so we did a bunch of that, and it really gave him some relief, right? He went from like 9 out of 10, just like can barely function, to like 3 out of 10, right? But then still the heaviness returns, the fatigue returns, which is to be expected. But then I asked him, as we were going through, okay, some other things that you can do to just focus on allowing your body to relax, right? Because so many people are so tense. They're not stretching. They're not breathing properly. Their breath is all constricted. They're not getting body work done regularly. They're just a ball of tension, physical, mental, emotional tension. And that's incredibly draining. And so that's where he was. And I asked him, because we hadn't done a deep dive into his nutrition yet, because he had been unable to actually put the time together to fill out the forms and do the blood work and get me back that information so we could look at it. So I just asked him, do you take magnesium? Right? And magnesium is, you can think of it as the relaxation mineral. Like without enough magnesium, we will tend to be tight, stressed, headaches, anxiety, sometimes depression, low energy, fatigue. All these things can be exacerbated by low or deficient magnesium. So I asked him, do you take magnesium? Because this is something that I've seen universally beneficial across the board, right? Unless you live in a place where you have like hot springs or spring water that's naturally high in magnesium, you need to supplement with magnesium to get a therapeutic dose of that. And so I asked him, and he said, yeah, I take it. And I said, how many milligrams do you take? He said, 200. He looks at the bottle, 200. And now this man weighs 260 pounds. He's a big dude. He carries it well. He's a big dude. 200 milligrams of magnesium for someone of that size is like maybe 15 to 20% of what his body actually needs, right? And so people, again, it's this idea like, oh, I take the magnesium. And I could tell the way I asked him about the magnesium, he was already responding to it as if like, no, I already take that. I've already tried that. It didn't work, right? Little does he know, well, you need to take like 5 times as much as what you're taking to have a shot at getting the benefits that magnesium can provide.
Well, that's good information for me because I don't think I take enough either. So I'm going to look at my dosages when we're done here, but go ahead.
Yeah, and it's really simple. You take your body weight, divide it by 25, right? So if you're, whatever it is, you can do the math. For every 25 pounds of body weight, between 100 on the low end and a 150 on the upper end milligrams of magnesium per day. And the more stressed you are, the less you sleep, and the more you push yourself physically, typically the more you can use because your body's sweating it out, it's using it up, it's got higher demands.
I want to make sure too our listeners understand this. My podcast is a father's perspective on raising kids. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But for you moms out there, because I know you moms are listening in too, this is important for you too. This is not just a male thing. This is um, are you done with the magnesium? Because I got another one to ask you.
Yeah. But it was
Creatine.
again, just to say that, like, had we never looked at magnesium as a very
Right.
simple thing, we could try all the therapy, all the exercise, all the fancy gadgets, all the fancy peptides. You could do so many things, and he would still likely be, dealing with unrelenting fatigue for God knows how long. And like, you think about how many people are going through their lives like this, trying a bunch of stuff, wondering why nothing's working, and they haven't started. It's like trying to drive a car without gas, right? That's an obvious example because we clearly understand, oh, the car needs gas to operate, right? Our bodies are much more complex than a car, and it needs many more different ingredients in order to operate and to operate, at a high level, right? In the way that we're capable of, not just like good enough to survive. So yeah, it's super, super important. You got to check these things.
What are your thoughts
And
on creatine? So I take creatine
yeah,
every day, and I feel like I should take 10 milligrams. I'm 260. I'm 6'2", 260. I'm a big person.
yeah,
Um, I've got my wife starting to take creatine because I've seen a lot of studies about Alzheimer's and creatine, how they're related and things like that. It's doesn't taste like anything. You can put it in anything. You can get it organic, at Costco. Uh, do you advocate for that when you're talking to your people too? Creatine.
yeah. It's a fantastic supplement. I've taken it daily for years. Um, and again, it's one of those things where, yeah, by body weight and or stress level or sleep deprivation, right? And this is becoming more popular. Like, if you're really underslept, you can take 2 or 3 times the amount that you would normally take. And what creatine does is it provides energy to a specific pathway in the cell that is typically responsible for, some of our power output, right? Which is why athletes like it. You get a bit more power and also endurance with that power. So you might be able to push harder for longer. And it also holds water in the muscle. And because it's helping with that energy production, that's hypothesized to be, the mechanism behind protecting the brain, right? Is because it's allowing the brain to access energy in a really easily usable format, when it might otherwise be, struggling for whatever reason, right? If someone has like diabetes, their body's not burning sugar very effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so their brain is going to be suffering. Their brain is going to be in a low energy state, even though they may be overweight, right? And it's just because the machinery is not operating properly. So I'm a fan. I mean, it works really, really well for a lot of people. And there's virtually no risk, right? If you take too much, you might have watery stool, but there's virtually no risk taking something like it. And especially if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, then you really need to, take it because you're not going to find it in any of the plant foods, right? It only occurs naturally in red meat, as far as I'm aware. And so, even if you do eat red meat, you're not going to get a therapeutic dose of creatine in most cases. But yeah, it's one of those, universally good in most cases, I would say.
So when you take on a client, and let's just use this guy for an example, not to pound on him, but
Yeah.
and he's going to, he's got a busy schedule already, and you got to try to fit some stuff in there for him. Um, is he getting enough? Was he getting enough sleep, or is he getting enough sleep?
In this case, no. And that's been like a perpetual pattern, right? Which is the thing that we're focused on right now, is like the earlier we get you to bed, because hours before midnight are much more restorative than hours after midnight. And he had this pattern where, because he wasn't getting as much work done during the day, he felt guilty and then would keep himself up trying to play catch up.
Yep.
But then that sets him up to feel like shit the next day, and, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And so,
I did sales.
yeah,
I still do sales for years, and I would do the same thing when I was. And here's what I found with parents. So, um, You get up in the morning, you get your kids squared away, you get them to school, you get them fed, you get them whatever. Then you go to work, then you come home, then you get your kids fed, homework, blah, blah, blah. And by the time you're exhausted at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, you turn on a TV for half an hour, probably fall asleep. And then you try to go to bed, which is difficult after you've already slept. And then you've not done one thing for yourself, right? You haven't concentrated on, and I have this oxygen theory, oxygen mask theory, right? You got to put that on before you can help anybody. So if you're not spending, and I've done podcasts on this, and I'm doing a blog next week, that if you're not paying attention to your health and all those things, you cannot be the optimum leader, right? The optimum example for your kids, yeah, or for your, whoever you're leading at work or whatever. So this is paramount to life and to your success, that you got to put some time in with yourself. And
Yeah.
you don't have to go to the gym for an hour. I mean, I do that. I go at 5 a.m, so I get it out of the way before anybody's even moving. And is it difficult? It was when I first started it, but I've been doing it for so long now. It doesn't. I wake up at 4:30 and 4 o'clock automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Is this when you're trying to kind of sculpture someone's life, and you're taking this guy, for instance, you're going, okay, you're going to have to cut this out or do this and do. How do they respond to that? I know it's hard because they're creatures of habit, right? We all are.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it's linked to something that's important enough for them, what people would call like having a strong enough why, right? That really helps. Then it's not just all them pushing themselves; they're being pulled towards this thing that's intrinsically more, appealing. So that helps. Getting the framing around it set. That like, okay, we're not doing this for you to lose 10 pounds, right? We're doing this so that you can have energy and presence with your kids, right? So you can be present and you can, get down on the ground and play with them and have energy and, be rough and tumble and have a great time. Like that's why we're doing this. We're doing this so you can show up to the office and, really crush that presentation, right? That's why we're doing this. The physical benefits, they're going to happen. They're great. But for most people, they're not trying to be like a physique athlete or a bodybuilder. They don't care about, having an 8-pack and 10% body fat. They just want to look good, feel strong, feel confident, feel energized.
Well, and I frame my coaching stuff because I have a called Ground Truth Leadership Audit, where I would go into a company and I'd help them find those spots where they're not getting the mission statement down to whoever in the company, right? And when you're doing that, if you can't get aligned, your whole entire company isn't going in the same direction, you're going to have some hiccups. And my thing is, if you're, let's say your bottom line, your front line people are looking at you, and you're 50 pounds overweight, and you don't have any energy, and you're angry at math. This is a horrible example, obviously, to set for your kids or the people you're leading. So this is why the work you're doing is so friggin' important for people to. Because if people are watching them, their kids are watching them. So what's going in your body is what your kids are watching, and then you're giving it to them too.
Yeah, they just grow up thinking it's normal.
Exactly.
Right? This is just how we are. This is just how my family is, or this is just what people eat.
And I hate using this example because I know it pisses people off, especially your generation. We were thin when we were kids. It was rare to see a child that was obese, that was overweight. And when I'm at the gym now, I'm seeing 18, 19-year-olds come in, they're 100 pounds overweight, 150 pounds overweight. And am I body shaming them? No, I want them healthy. That's what I want for them. I want them to feel that energy and feel all those things. I'm not making fun of them. I want to encourage them to continue to lift weights, to get some exercise, to get outside. We were introduced kind of by Scott Shepard. He's an outdoors guy, right? Get your kids outside. And when we were on our podcast, we talked about that.
Yeah.
How important is that? In addition to the supplements and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's massive. And just on the previous note there, in terms of like getting men into motion on new habits, right? So I take the approach of what's the smallest thing we can do that moves the needle, that gets you into the game, that gets progress happening, but doesn't feel overwhelming or like it's going to interfere with your entire life. Mm-hmm. Right? So many times it's like, okay, you're going to go to bed 30 minutes earlier and you're going to wake up, 30 to 60 minutes earlier, and you're going to take a walk in the morning. If all you did for the next 7 to 10 days were those two things, you better believe your body's going to be thanking you.
Yeah.
right? You're going to have more energy. You're going to be less stressed. You might lose a pound or two if your nutrition's dialed in just simply by adding a walk into your day. Um, and so like the body responds so quickly, and it's getting people that felt experience of, oh, I was this way. My mornings were this way, heavy, depressing, stressful, etc.
Yeah.
Now I'm walking first thing, and all of a sudden I feel, more uplifted. My mindset's more positive, and I'm excited for the day versus dreading the day.
Yeah.
And something as simple as getting outside for a walk can do that. I'm a huge fan of as much nature integration that you can get, the better, right? I mean, I live in the woods, right? We moved 5 hours from the Toronto area where I grew up, and we're building a cottage out here. And there's deer everywhere, and there's birds, and there's a river, and just pristine, clean, fresh air, and it's quiet and it's peaceful. And just being outside of a busy city subjectively felt like my testosterone and my energy went up like 30%, like just removing myself from the stress of a city, right? And so not everybody can do that, but you can go to the park, right? You can find a tree to climb. You can find, something,
Yeah.
something, doesn't matter what it is, but whatever that is, and then stack things on top of each other, right? So I've got another client who's got a little baby girl, his first child, and he has a dog also that he's responsible for walking, and even more so while his wife was pregnant, and just after giving birth because she was, with baby. And as he walks the dog, he does some lunges, he does some push-ups, he gets the sunshine, right? He can take his shirt off and get sunshine if it's sunny day. He can breathe the fresh air. So he's getting vitamin D, sunlight. He's recharging himself with fresh oxygen, fresh air. He's getting a little sweat on. He's getting some exercise. All of those things happen at the same time that he's doing his walk with the dog and the baby, right? So it's not like we're adding anything to his day in terms of
Right.
time. We're just using the time he already has in a more intentional fashion, right? Same way if somebody has a commute, listen to something inspiring like this podcast instead of, talk radio, right? And I think that's for so many people, that's where it starts, right? They change the information that's going in, and then all of a sudden they start thinking this different way, and they're like, okay, I'll wake up and, have my coffee and walk outside while I have my coffee instead of sit in front of the TV, right? Like the smallest little change. And then they're like, oh, this kind of worked, right? And then they're a believer. They're like, okay, there's something to this. And then that tends to lead them further and further down the path.
So funny. I used to listen to music when I go to the gym, like everybody else. And for probably the last year, I've listened to a YouTube channel called Motiversity. And it's a lot of times motivational speakers, or I hate the word motivational because it's
Yeah.
these inspiring speakers and there's pieces of their speech, right? And I started doing that, and it did change my frame of mind when I'm in the gym. It makes me concentrate more instead of, trying to go to the music, which I can't move. So, but okay, another big one, and I know every person's going to cringe when we bring this up, is sugar.
Yeah.
I've heard that sugar is worse than cocaine at some level if you're using it on a regular basis. And the amount of sugar we eat, not me, I'm not a big sugar eater.
Yeah.
I'll have some ice cream or something once in a blue moon, but I'm more of a carb guy. So I would rather have a potato than a uh, ice cream cone.
Yeah.
But we're consuming sugar at enormous amounts, and it's killing America. I mean, it's bad. So
Yeah.
when you said that somebody when you take on a client, they fill out a questionnaire. Are you asking them? Are you eating dessert? Are you eating sugar? Is that one of the questions on your questionnaire?
Yeah. So dietary habits for sure. We need to get a wide angle view of what's normal for them. And sugar is an interesting one, right? And of course, refined white sugar, right? There's not really anything that's redeemable about it, right? And you will find niche pockets of people online who say, oh, no, it's just pure fuel, right? It's not bad. And certainly, if you're an athlete and you're like you're basically the equivalent of like a V12 high performance engine, yeah, a little sugar is going to burn through your system in no time, right? Doesn't mean it's ideal, right? But it's not going to necessarily, cause you to fall off track if it's done in moderation. That said, there's a big difference between refined white sugar versus like raw honey, for example, right? Honey, yes, there's a high amount of sugar in it, but there's also enzymes, there's also immune support, supporting factors. And there's all kinds of complex sugars which break down entirely differently in the body than just like sucrose, right? Which is table sugar, right? Sucrose, which is fructose and glucose, and it digests very rapidly. And there's no minerals, there's no vitamins, there's no fiber, there's none of the things that we would get from eating a piece of fruit, right? Or eating a potato or eating a sweet potato or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I mean, no one needs it. It's not helping anybody, right? You can have a healthy-ish relationship with it if you can practice moderation and your system is metabolically healthy, right? Which is a big assumption for most because most people are trending towards metabolic disease, right? Prediabetes, diabetes, this kind of thing. And for many reasons is why they're trending there. And it's not just sugar, right? The kinds of fats that people eat are arguably long-term more dangerous because our cell membranes get built out of fat. And so sugar, it comes in, you process it, whatever effect it has, it might destabilize you for a while. It might cause cravings, might cause a crash in your energy after. But you're not building your cell membranes and your actual, physical body. You're not building it out of sugar. It's being burned and, gotten rid of. Fats, you're building yourself out of. It takes about 3 years to give ourselves an oil change, right? So if you've been eating like I did for many years growing up, fast food, refined food, vegetable oils, fried food, all this kind of stuff, and if that's making up a lot of your structure, it's going to take about 3 years of not eating that stuff for it to be sort of replaced and refreshed with whatever
Wow.
healthier things you're eating.
I never heard that. That's crazy.
And yeah, and so it's simply um, looking at the effect on a metabolic level of the prolonged consumption of things like vegetable oils, right? So highly processed, industrial, highly inflammatory, usually fried oils, right? These are very, very damaged fats. And so those act like gunk inside the energy producing parts of our cells to literally break our ability to produce energy, which then makes everything less efficient. So everything starts to slow down. Metabolism slows down. You hold on to more weight more easily. And then it sets you up for all kinds of diseases long term, heart disease, cancers of all kinds, all these things that ultimately come back to a lack of enough cellular energy, right? Because when the cell has enough energy to repair itself, to replace broken pieces, to clean things up, then it's a bit of a self-perpetuating thing. But when it doesn't have that energy, right, for whatever reason, chronic stress, nutrient depletion, lack of sleep, even really intense mental emotional trauma will put our cells into a state of survival in which they're not taking in new nutrients and getting rid of old stuff, right? And this is why so many cancers are brought on from a mental emotional traumatic event, right? They have the conditions are already there because they've been eating the wrong things and their body's toxic. But then something happens, and this was my mom, for example. Like when I was almost dying in the hospital, her mom had just died of dementia. I'm in the hospital. I'm her youngest, and then like 6 months later, she's got breast cancer showing up.
Oh, good Lord.
Right? She's great now, and she even put the pieces together. Right? As she did more research, like, oh yeah, there was so much stress going on that she was holding on to that it materialized right in her body. And that is more often than not the case, right? There's conditions that are set in the body from what we're doing, eating, what we're exposed to, toxins, all these different things. That's the conditions, but then the trigger to bring on something like a tumor or something like, fill in the blank condition. The trigger is often one that is non-physical, but it pushes our ability to tolerate stress beyond its capacity, and then symptoms start to develop.
I was just having a conversation like this with my son. We're under a lot of stress right now for a lot of reasons, but it's not healthy, right? I can feel it. It's weighing down on me, right? Going to the gym helps, eating better helps, all those things help. And so I obviously continue to do those things, but it does, you've got to try to position yourself not to be stressed out. But 8 kids, I have almost 21 grandchildren. Things come up, you know,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you something, and I know I'm completely shifting gears here. I have a lot of friends that like diet soda. And I
Mm,
always tell them, good Lord, I used to work for Pepsi and I drank soda all the time. My wife and I just kind of stopped years ago, and we'll have one here and there, but it's not, and I have one less than she does. Um, but I see these people that have had cancer and things like that, and they're still drinking this diet soda. And I'm like, oh my God, please
yeah.
stop. This stuff's just shit you're putting in your body, man. It's as
Yeah.
bad or worse than regular soda, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly not helping anything. And I mean, luckily nowadays there's alternatives if you really have to get your fix, right?
Uh-huh.
There's things like Zevia, which is stevia sweetened soda. There's things like Poppy, right? Which is like very, very low sugar with some probiotics, with some apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, I've seen.
Super delicious. Has the same, taste and effect, but is not
Super
going to have.
expensive too.
Oh yeah, it's
It's
like I
expensive
mean,
stuff.
it's like the equivalent. Like I don't really drink alcohol much, so for me, if I spoil myself with some fancy soda, that's like most people's 6 pack, right, or a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it's like there are alternatives these days if you have the will. Um, but yeah, it's stress is a huge one, and so much of stress is the way we perceive it. Right. This is why my work progressively over the last few years has taken more and more and more of a mental emotional angle to complement all the nutritional pieces, because there's nothing I can do in terms of your diet that's going to make you better able to stay calm and cool and collected when shit happens, right? Like, sure, there are some things that I could give you to support your neurotransmitter, support your testosterone, your cortisol. Certainly, there are some things. So my statement is not exactly accurate. But if we can change the way you're interpreting what's happening, such that this is just what's happening, right? Because there's what happens, and then there's the story and the meaning that we create and project onto it, right? So, like, if I ran my car into a tree, right? I could get, for whatever reason, I could get super frustrated and create this massive story of, oh my God, this is the end of my life. I can't afford to fix this. What am I going to do? I can't drive anywhere now. Oh my God, like who put this tree here? Like all this kind of nonsense.
Yeah.
And people do this, right? Versus, oh, either maybe I was tired, I fell asleep, I hit a tree. Thank God I'm alive. Only my car is damaged. Okay, I'm blessed. Thank the sweet Lord. I'm blessed. I'll figure it out. It's a car. Cars come and go. Not the end of the world,
And I've
right?
talked a lot about this, how I could sit down with anybody, you included, for 30 minutes, and you would end up telling me about a trauma in your life that you're not completely 100% over.
Mm.
And we all have a ton of trauma in our life. And this is where I go back to that, whether you're going to meditate, whether you want to just go in the corner and cry for 5 minutes, you got to take care of that stuff before you can be an effective leader or a good leader. And we all
Yeah.
have it. I mean, unfortunately, life is not fair all the time, whatever way you want to put it. And
Mm-hmm.
things are going to happen. And they might not even happen to you, they might happen around you,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
could affect you just as much. And I have several friends that used to, I don't know, I had just one of these people that people would call me and just start kind of bleeding out. And so Simon Sinek always talks about just sitting in the mud with somebody is good enough, right? You don't have to fix it, just be able to sit in the mud. And you're kind of doing that. You're kind of in your business, you're kind of sitting in the mud with people and letting them, they'll kind of fix it on their own in a way. You're going to give them some information, but it's first, they got to make the first phone call. Like
Yeah.
you're not cold calling people and going, hey, how fucked up are you? I can take care. You know what I mean? You're waiting. They're
Maybe
calling.
I should try. Maybe I should try. Maybe that would work.
I'll be your sales guy. I can just call people and go, hey, how screwed up are you? I have a buddy.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how fucked up are you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So,
Yeah.
well, dude, I don't know, man. I swear to God, I could talk to you about this for hours. We might need to do another podcast. So
That
let's
too.
get to the big one for men and for women sometimes. I told you my experience with testosterone. This is a big one. And I'll tell my story real quick. I went to the doctor and asked him to test my testosterone, and he said, "Why? Are you tired? Are you this? Are you that?" I said, "No, I'm around guys at the gym and they chirp, you know." And I was probably, this is, I don't know, 15 years ago, I was probably 45, 50. And my testosterone was like dangerously low.
Mm.
So I went on clomiphene as therapy for a while. And then I take testosterone therapy now. Have I felt a difference? I don't know. I didn't feel bad before. I've been doing it so long now. I guess if I stopped it for a year, I might be able to tell you if it helped. But yeah, every 2 weeks I get a nice big shot right in my ass, and I don't know when I do get blood work done, my testosterone is normal. So how does this? Where do you see this come up? Do you have people get blood work and tell you what the testosterone is and all that stuff? And are there any
Yeah,
foods that can help with that?
yeah, yeah. Great question. And I've got a bunch of resources that I can share with you to put in the show notes if you do show notes,
Mhm.
and get people a lot of this information in a really easy to digest, condensed format. Because I took a deep dive into this whole subject back in like 2019, 2020. And so I'm happy to share those resources. But that said, big picture, yeah, it's important, right? Testosterone, for those that aren't aware, it is the dominant male hormone, right? It helps us get taller, stronger, denser muscles, deeper voices, typically more assertive or aggressive in how we approach life. If we want to win, it also makes pain more pleasurable, which is interesting. So
That
the
is interesting.
two people that lift the same weight, right? And you would know this, and you know we're in the same boat here. Anyone who really enjoys lifting weights and has done so for a while, likely is not going to be super deficient. And of course, there's different cases, and maybe your numbers were this kind of example, where on a numbers level it was low, but still you enjoyed lifting weights. Either way, there's a pleasure that you can derive from pain, and it seems like the more testosterone you have, the more you're able to do that, right? Which is really interesting to think about. And it's important. I always want to see where it's at, especially if someone is dealing with a lot of health issues and they're feeling run down and burnt out. Then yeah, I can pretty accurately assess that they're going to be suboptimal, right? So they're going to be on the low end of normal, or they're going to be actually like clinically deficient, right? But anywhere near the low end of the spectrum is not good, right? So the range, and depends where you live, you might have different units, but in the U.S. and in parts of Canada, it'll be a range from about 300 to 1,000 is like the normal range.
That's
But
what
if you're at like 300 or 400, you're probably not feeling great, right? We want to get you between like 650 to 1,100, right? Especially if you're an athlete, right? That's going to give you like optimal performance. And so knowing what that is to start is really important. Knowing why that is what it is, if it's low, and there's no amount of training or nutrition that you can take that will replace a good night of sleep, right? So that's still foundational here, because our hormones are typically secreted while we're sleeping, right? Growth hormone, testosterone, these things are secreted while we're in deep sleep, and we're in that restorative cycle, which tends to happen earlier in the night, right? So from like 11 p.m. to say 1 a.m. is a lot of the physiological repair that's taking place.
I.
So we want to know what it is. We want to know, what's going on. Are you not sleeping? Are you just stressed out? Are you eating like garbage? You're not consuming real food. You might be deficient in certain things. So like things like magnesium, zinc, vitamin D are three of the big ones that really help the body to produce testosterone. This is, partly why lying in the sun and having a healthy tan, not burning your skin, but having a healthy tan is so helpful for your hormones,
Yeah.
because vitamin D, contributes to the production of testosterone. And so there are a lot of things in terms of nutrients and foods, right? Things like red meat, things like shellfish, anything that's a dense source of magnesium, zinc, um, vitamin D also in food. Boron is another cool one, which helps to liberate bound testosterone into free testosterone. So without producing any more, your cells can access more of what you have. And it also has benefits for bone health too. Boron does. It's a very
Interesting.
simple mineral. You can get it from food. I take 3 milligrams once or twice a day. So there's all these different things, right? There's all these different things that can and will impact the body's ability to produce testosterone, and like what's ideal or healthy for one person can be very different than another, right? So the last time that I tested mine, which was somewhat shortly after I first left the city and was diving deep into all this, my total testosterone was about 1200, and my free was somewhere above average. And but if you look at me, I'm like 160 pounds. I can't grow a beard if I tried to. I'm pretty balanced individual. I'm not the ultra aggressive macho dude, right? And so I say that to share that you can have a lot of testosterone, but not be this super macho, aggressive dude. Like I like, lifting weights, and I like doing work with my hands, and I like, sweating and working hard, and all these things are definitely part of how I express myself. Um, but it doesn't mean that somebody who looks a lot more manly traditionally, right? Beard, wider bone structure, right? Whatever those things may be, easier time putting on muscle mass. Like I have to work like my life depends on it to put on weight. That individual, his healthy, optimal range might be like 700, right? Mine's not better. His isn't worse. It's just what's unique and ideal for our bodies.
Well, I mean, there's always genetics, right? And there's nothing you can get around that stuff. I'm not a large bone person, but I can tell you when I met my wife, I was we got married when I was 40. I was wearing a 42 long, or when I met her, 36, I was wearing a 42 long jacket. 10 years
Mm,
later, after taking some synthetic things, I was a 52 long jacket. So my shoulders got super big, and they've stayed that way. So I do a lot of back work, shoulder work, things like that. So, but I'm not big boned. Like I don't have these huge wrists or anything. I'm kind of average, when it comes to that. And my testosterone was not as high as yours. So we got to wrap this up, brother. I mean, we're in an hour already, and I swear to God, we might need to do another podcast. And I'll do show notes. So anything you can send me would be great.
hmm
And we might want to maybe put something out there that people that really want to hear about specific things, we can kind of be a little bit more focused because we were kind of all over the place. But
Yeah.
let me do an outro. Stay online for me. I really appreciate you being on. You gave me, I got 100 questions to ask you too. I'm probably going to send you an email
Yeah.
about some
Well,
of
and
these supplements and
if I,
things.
if I can offer one other thing for the listeners, right?
Please.
This is something that I recently put together to really help men understand their blood work, right? So it's called the Vital Man Lab Cheat Sheet. And so here are some of the most important markers to be aware of. Here's what the normal, quote unquote, normal range is. Here's where we want you to be. And here's what shows up as symptoms when you're not there. Right.
Good.
And so that way, if they already have blood work, they can start to put some of the pieces together, right? And see, oh, my doctor said everything's normal, right? How many times do people say, my doctor said everything's normal, but they're like diabetic and grossly overweight? And it's like, what are you talking about? How can it possibly be normal? It's clear from looking at you that things aren't working very well. And so it really rubs me the wrong way when doctors give people that false sense of security because they haven't, they can't diagnose them with a disease yet, so they're healthy. And it's just like it's the most non-common sense approach to health. So I'll put that together. We can link it in the show notes.
Yes.
It's a very short video training, walks you through 6 lab markers to be aware of, and yeah, it'll certainly help to connect some dots and fill in some gaps if you're wondering, everything's normal, but I feel like it's not normal. I don't feel great.
So yeah, like I said, we could go down another road with that because a lot of times I know how I'm feeling if I need to eat something. Like for I my wife and I were seeing a trainer and we were eating clean for a long time, and then 1 month I cut carbs and alcohol out completely, lost 19 pounds. But I knew when I needed some red meat, I could feel it. Right, I needed some iron or I needed some carbs or whatever, so I would have a small dose of carbs. But I got to know it's funny when the last time I saw my doctor, because we had the same doctor for about 15 years, he hugged me and he goes, "Oh my God, I forgot how big you were." And I said, "And you've been going to the gym, right?" He's like, "No, I don't go to the gym." I'm like, you hypocrite. You know what I mean? You can sit here and tell us all these things for us to do, and you don't even exercise. And he looks okay, but he could definitely benefit from some exercise. And he's younger than me too, which is funny. I could probably throw him over a fence, take his lunch money, but I wouldn't do that. Bryan, you're awesome, man. And I think we probably need to, like I said, revisit some specific things on another podcast if that's okay with you. Let me do an outro. Don't get off yet. This is Ed Franklin, No Limits podcast. This is a Raising 10/No Limits podcast today because it touched on a lot of different things that work in both areas. You can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com or on any of my social media platforms. I'll have a bunch of notes in here that you can link up with Bryan if you want to. He's in Canada, but you can link up with him anyway. We still love him. And just kidding. We don't have any problem with Canadians. It's these other ones we got problems with. But anyway, all right, man. You guys all have a great week, and I will talk to everybody soon.